Welcome. We're so glad you're here. I'm Sarah McLean, if you don't know me, and I was chair of church council. And at our meeting in October, we were treated to a presentation by Pastor Emily and Pastor Vance, and were impressed. And the unanimous response was, everyone needs to see this. Everyone. These two people have come in and they've already loved on our church and have made really wise observations. And I want everyone here to enjoy their presentation. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce Campbell Goff, who's here to offer our devotion. She is a sophomore at Timber Creek High School, a member of SGA, and in the pre-med program. And for those of us here who are her church family, her birthday is Wednesday, and she'll be 16.
Hi. So Matthew 18:20 says, "For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I'm there with them." I can feel God's presence when I come here to worship and stand with my friends for youth group. I personally love to worship God through song. We can dance and sing, and I feel God's presence because I'm worshiping Him. But for me, I know it doesn't just have to be in a service to worship Him. I know that God's with me when I see the sunrise, the birds, and when I'm just talking with other believers. So, anytime you feel God and are trying to connect with Him, that's what I truly believe is worship. So with that, can you pray with me? Dear Lord, we gather here today. Help us to remember that we are here for you. Help us to let you be in control over everything that is done. And remember that everything is done for you. Let us praise your holy name and lift you high. Amen. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Campbell. Next, it's been going on for over a month now. You matter. You matter to us. I'd like to invite Roy and Allison to come and give a little report, or maybe just Roy. But we welcome you, and thank you for what y'all have put into this successful stewardship campaign.
Well, I am not in pre-med, so you can thank me for that. So here's where we stand as of Thursday. We have 223 pledges for $948,088. This does not include activity from Friday or this morning, and this puts us ahead of the game where we were this time last year at this point. Projection-wise, we still have 70 pledgers who have pledged from over the last 2 years that still haven't pledged yet. These folks are traditional in their late pledging, so we have been and will continue to reach out to them to nudge them along so that we can get final numbers in before we turn that over to finance at the end of the month so they can start planning for next year. Now, we project 50 of these folks to pledge, and that would put us at a final number at the end of the month at 273 pledges for $1,088,888, which would be an 8% increase in pledging units from last year and would be a 5% increase in dollars pledged for this coming year. Some exciting news from the campaign. We've had 40 new pledgers. 10 of these folks, 10 of these folks have no past history of giving with us at all. And the other 30 are folks that over the last few years have been givers, non-pledgers, and have moved over to the pledging side of the sheet. So that's very exciting. And then the other thing is our median age of our pledgers has dropped significantly, as this new group of 40 are much younger folks and much younger families as we build that baseline moving forward. So to all of you who have pledged, thank you. Many of you sitting in this room have increased your pledges significantly, and thank you for that. If you're sitting in this room and you haven't pledged, please do so. As you see, you do matter. So I ask for all of us to pray for our church, be present in our church, witness and invite others to our church. As we stated last week, one of the goals of the campaign was to reach each person individually. Another goal of this campaign was for Vance and for Emily to help set them up to say, this is who we are. This is the group that is in, and now we're ready to move forward. And as we exhaust the efforts over these next few weeks to get these last group of folks in, we want to have that list to move forward. So thank you to all for everything that you've done. And to the next few weeks, continue to pray as we close the books and move into next year. Thank you.
Well done, Roy and Allison. Thank you both. Next, we'll watch the presentation that was given to Church Council. And I think we start off with Emily. We do? We did.
Let's see. Oh, I did this right. Okay. All right. This is a little bit of a modified presentation from what was shared at Church Council. We updated it, we tweaked it, and hopefully it provides some context for where we are here at First Church. So I love to travel. Who likes to travel here, right? A lot of people, because I know you guys come and go, and you're like, oh, I was out of town. Wonderful, that's good. Wish I could go out of town. No, teasing. But, so when you travel, I mean, you could just leave your house and just drive aimlessly. But a lot of times we have a plan of where we want to go, right? A destination, someplace you're like, I want to go to the beach. And so in order to get to the beach from here, you kind of have to know where you are here. Because, I mean, in Central Florida, you could go east or west, and that'll make a difference on which beach you go to. You could go south, and it'll take you a lot longer to get to the beach, right? If you go north, good luck, right? And so I think it's helpful to kind of name where we are. So our current reality, from January to June of 2019 of this year, average worship attendance over 4 services was 307. Does that surprise anybody? Yeah. From July to October, just so that we could look at full months, the number was 397. So an increase of 90 people. And last week, when we had our combined service in here in the sanctuary, we had about 400 folks. Now, we know that there were people in the kitchen, and we know that there were some people moving around. And so around 400 is our best, most accurate estimate of what we think we had in one service on a Sunday morning. And if you were here last week, did we all fit in here? Yeah, just checking. Okay. One of a common theme that Vance and I have heard since we arrived here in July is we want to grow, right? Do you all want to grow as a church? Yeah. And just why? Why do we want to grow? You can shout it out. Why do we want to grow? Reach more people. All right. What else? Share God's love. Y'all are giving the right answers. Any other reasons why we want to grow? Who wants to be alone? Right. Yeah. What else? Huh? Money, right? Let's get practical here, right? We need the lights on and the air conditioning, right? This is a big room to air condition and to keep the lights on and to keep it maintained. So many of you have been around much longer than I have been. And there's a historical tradition of First United Methodist Church of Orlando being a large congregation, right? Is that accurate? So maybe that tradition, we want to preserve that. We want to uphold that. There's some pride there, but there's also just some nostalgia, some feelings, right, that we're connected with. Many of you who've been part of that tradition, part of that history, you feel personally invested and connected to that. We talked about it, more people equals more money to help keep the building and the programs and the ministry going. And I don't know about you, but it feels better when there are more people in the building. Whether it's here in the sanctuary or in the gathering space, in the contemporary worship center, and Sunday school classes, it just feels better when everybody's here or when more people are in the room. And all of those are good reasons to grow. And if that's where we're headed, to grow, I think it's important for us to think about the most important reason to grow. And some of you shared that as part of your answer. God calls us to grow. We have good news to share about Jesus. Sometimes I think we forget. And we want to share that good news with Jesus. We want to share with other people about that good news of Jesus. The transformation and the change that Jesus has made in our lives. The love that we have received from God. The love that we have received from other people. We want to share that with others. And we believe that other people need to hear and experience that same love of Jesus. If we don't really think that, then I think we've already lost. If we don't think other people need to be here to experience Jesus in this place, then it doesn't matter what we do here. If we've forgotten that core foundation. So here's some scripture, maybe. There we go. If you can read that on the screen, let's read that together from Genesis 1, verse 28. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fertile and multiply, fill the earth and master it." So this is in the beginning, right? In the very beginning in the garden. This is before the fall. This is before everything goes awry. And what does God say to those early people? Be fruitful, be fertile, and multiply. And yeah, maybe produce other people. But those early people were in perfect connection with God, uninterrupted relationship with God. And to say, hey, multiply, add more people into this, means add more people into this relationship, this perfect, uninterrupted relationship with God. That was God's original design in the beginning. And so for us to grow, to kind of say, hey, we want more people to experience this love of God. We want more people to experience relationship with God. It's going back to our original purpose, the purpose that God created us for. All right, from Matthew 28, if you can read this, let's read it together. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you. Look, I myself will be with you every day until the end of this present age. Is that familiar to folks? What is this verse often called? The Great Commission, to go and send out. Does it say, stay inside in your buildings? Stay at your address? No, what does it say? Go. Go out, expand. Go out beyond yourself and make disciples. Make disciples of Jesus. From John 21, let's read that together. When they had finished eating, Jesus asked Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" Simon replied, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." Jesus asked a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Simon replied, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." Jesus said to him, "Take care of my sheep." He asked a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was sad that Jesus asked him a third time, "Do you love me?" He replied, "Lord, you know everything. You know I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep." feed, take care, feed. Be in relationship. Go do. Tend to others. If you were in church this morning, does that sound kind of familiar? To care for one another, to be in relationship with one another. First of all, that picture, I stole it from the website. That's an old photo of people here at First Church. Let's read this verse together from Acts chapter 1, verse 8. Rather, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and all Judea and Samaria and to the end of the earth. What I love about this verse is that our commission, our call to go out, to be witnesses, to make disciples, it's not on our own power. Where does the power come from? The Holy Spirit, right? It's God's call. It's God's initiation saying, hey, be in relationship with me. And I'm going to give you the power to do it. I'm going to give you what you need to do it. The power, the resources. It comes from me. And I'm going to send you out in my name. And you're going to go out all throughout the world, even into the places where it's hard and uncomfortable. And then from Acts chapter 2, let's read these verses together. The believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to the community, to their shared meals, and to their prayers. A sense of awe came over everyone. God performed many wonders and signs through the apostles. All the believers were united and shared everything. They would sell pieces of property and possessions and distribute the proceeds to everyone who needed them. Every day, they met together in the temple and ate in their homes. They shared food with gladness and simplicity. They praised God and demonstrated God's goodness to everyone. The Lord added daily to their number those who were being saved. In this verse, what are some of the actions of the community? What were some of the things that the community did together? Ate together. We like that. Wasn't it last week when we ate together? If you were here, was that fun? Was it nice to see everyone? I think we need more times when we can gather at tables together and eat together and be together. What else did they do in this passage? Praise God, worship together. What else did they do? So they sold stuff, right? They were generous. What did you say? Right. They used the proceeds to help others. They were generous. They looked beyond themselves. Said, how can we bless others? Was it last week in your sermon, Vance, that you were looking in the history and they talked about how this church was credited for being like one of the most generous churches in terms of its missional giving? Just giving money away to missionaries and organizations saying, do good. Let's join in with that, right? We're going to partner with you in doing good in the world. This has some resonances with what we were just hearing in Acts chapter 2 and what we kind of call the early church, the early gathering. Anything else? They prayed together. Yeah, they reminded each other, right? They had conversations about God. They had conversations about what God was doing in the world, the difference that God had made in their lives. They witnessed to one another, right? And their witness mattered. I don't know about you, but when I read this passage, I'm always a little convicted. I'm like, ooh, ouch. I just feel like I've got my toes stepped on a little bit. Because I think I can pray more than I do. And I think I can spend time talking to more people about what God is doing in my life, the difference that God has made in my life, the change that God makes in my life more than I do. And I'm a pastor. In these verses that we read today, I think they kind of remind us of the real reason that we're to grow. If grow is the destination, we need to know why. And it's why because that's how God created us. When God created the church, said, here, church, this is how you're supposed to live your life in community, to live your life with me and to live your life with others. You're to be a community of prayer and of scripture reading, of worship, a community of generosity, a community that eats together and fellowships with one another, that cares for one another, that looks beyond who's here currently and is always going after who's not here yet and needs to be, who needs to hear of this Jesus, who needs to experience this life-changing love. And let's be about that. I've stunned them into silence.
There's a lot of people here. Look around. This is pretty great. I didn't realize how many had come in when we got started. Thank you for being here. So there's a lot of things we could talk about. You know, this was really Emily and I's presentation to Church Council as we've been observing and conversations. We've had meetings with all of the committees, all the leaders, many small groups in the church. And so we've just listened. And as Emily shared, we've heard over and over a desire to grow. And sometimes a bit of despair that maybe we can't grow anymore. We believe we can. We believe we can. There's the law of entropy. Have you heard the law of entropy? That everything is basically growing or what? Dying. I mean, that's the natural inclination. Once something stops growing, it goes into decline. And so we believe growth is important so that that's not the case. We don't want to be a declining, dying institution. We want to be a growing, thriving, fruitful institution. Agree? We all on board there? Good. I just thought it was, I hadn't seen this docile in a long time, but we put this one up today. And I just thought, well, that's great for today. This image of John 15, I am the vine, you're the branches, abide in me, and I will abide in you. And you will bear great fruit if you do, right? Or fruit in abundance. That image in Scripture over and over, that if we are doing and being the people we're called to be, we will be healthy, vital, growing, and fruitful, right? Think about Jesus in the parable of the sower, right? Sow the seed, the word of God, and it produces a yield 100 times, right? That's the image. So how do we be a church that is a growing, fruitful, thriving church? There's a lot of things we could talk about. There's a few that we're going to talk about. To grow, we're going to need to be intentional about a variety of things. And I think one is that we need to become younger and more diverse and more unchurched. I'll go in reverse order. We don't want to steal from other churches. That's just sheep stealing. That's just easy, right? We exist to reach the people that need to hear the good news, that don't currently know the good news. We need to make sure. It's easy to grow and just, hope people come and transfer in from other churches they don't like as much as ours. It's life-changing when you reach people that aren't currently going to church. And that's what we're called to, is transform lives, right? More diverse, look around the room, folks. We have some wonderful diversity within the room, but do we reflect the diversity of Central Florida? No. We reflect Delaney Park more than we do going west of our church, right? If you pay attention to any of the demographic studies that are being done, Orlando is going to grow significantly in the coming years, younger and more diverse, largely Spanish-speaking. Are we prepared for that? Are we prepared to grow in a way that really reflects the community? Because, by the way, that reflects the kingdom. When we reflect the community, we reflect the kingdom. So are we ready to that? And obviously, no way to disparage our senior members. We thank God for them. But we need to continue to reach the next generation. The Bible talks about that a lot, reaching the next generation. To do that, we're going to have to become increasingly visitor-focused. If you take a look at our programs, our bulletin, our budget, our website, it's pretty focused on us. That most of what we do is for us. And it's a shift in mindset to say we're going to become visitor-oriented. It's beginning to say, this is God's church, and we're here to offer it to the world. Right? It's for those who aren't here that we labor. And so inviting you into that, of beginning to say, everything we do isn't just for me and my family. What we do here is so that we can be here for those who currently aren't with us. That means we're going to need to realign resources strategically for growth. We basically have had a budget that we're doing really well in our, that we're doing well in terms of supporting this year and this year's stewardship campaign. But over recent years, we've been trimming fat. It's bare bones right now. And there isn't a lot in that budget that's growth-oriented. So it means we're going to need to take a look at the budget and say, do we need to say we're going to spend less money here and more money here that would grow us? Are we currently budgeting toward growth, or are we budgeting toward maintenance? Are we budgeting to make a difference in the world, or are we budgeting for us? Right? That's a big shift. We're not there yet, by the way, but that's some work that we're going to need to do. It means that instead of spending all of our communication efforts on talking to ourselves, how do we begin to market better to the community? And I know that's a secular word of marketing, branding, that sort of thing. But just think about how often do we communicate beyond these walls what we have available here? Mostly we just talk to ourselves. Mostly it's just information for us. How do we begin to shift that so that information is available to the broader world? Here's what we have to offer because we'd love for you to be part of it. And it's going to require increased hospitality so that when someone comes through the door, they are greeted as much as they're comfortable with. Now, you know, and I both know that sometimes people like to come in and be anonymous. But we should be able to make that their choice, not because we've kind of forced them to be anonymous, right? You understand what I mean? In all of the ministries I've led up to this point, my goal has been that nobody can get through the door or out before they've had their hand shaken 5 times. You seem surprised at that. You seem surprised at that. 5 isn't very much. One of them is just when we stand up and greet each other on Sunday morning. As long as they're not sitting at the back of the room and we go back and talk to them, right? It's a little thing, right, to shake hands with somebody and make sure they're welcome. So increased hospitality. And then increased opportunities for involvement. And the most likely way for a new person to get involved is in a new thing. That most of the time, once we've done something for a little while, a group has met for a little while, a ministry's gotten going for a little while, it's hard to break in. Relationships have formed. It's hard to be the new person. It's hard to walk in the door if nobody's invited you in. Some of your groups are wonderful at that. Some of you are really good at that. Others, it's harder, right? And so that means starting new opportunities to serve. I'll give you an example. I've started a Wednesday night Bible study, a Friday morning Bible study. I noticed new relationships are forming because everybody could just show up, start new. We need to keep offering those kinds of things. New opportunities so that somebody doesn't feel like they have to break in to an old existing thing. And that all the time. So when somebody visits the church, they don't have to search for how do I get involved. It's right there. Here's an opportunity this week. Plug in. Oh, that's easy. I could try that. See if it works. And an emphasis on excellence. So the first time you come over to somebody's house for the first time, most of the time we put on you put on your best foot forward when somebody comes to your house the first time, right? So if you invite Kelly and I over for dinner, probably you're going to get out the good china, right? The first time you're going to clean out the litter box, right? Right? But after you've invited us over 2, 3, 4 times, are you still going to break out the good china? By then, you're probably going to use paper plates and order pizza, right? And if they aren't used to the cat by now, right? Well, sometimes that happens. Like we get used to things being good enough. When we get comfortable with each other, when we get comfortable, and we forget the impression. Now, don't get me wrong. I think we offer a lot of really wonderful things. But an emphasis on excellence that honors God and honors our guests keeps a standard that's high. One of the things that the staff has heard me say, that if you're in leadership, you'll hear me say, is I hate the word just. Like, well, it's just. Just means only, right? Good enough, right? I'm not good enough. I'm not a good enough kind of guy. Are we offering our very best in a way that honors God and our guests when they come in? They have a sense that we're ready for them and we've prepared something really special for them, right? And by the way, don't you like it too? Don't we enjoy excellence? Deeper discipleship. One observation that I've made coming back, when I was here back in 1990-ish, there were several things happening here at the church that deeply formed people. One of those was Disciple Bible Study. Raise your hand if you participated at Disciple Bible Study back in the day. Deeply formed people. Walk to Emmaus. Would you raise your hand if you were involved in Walk to Emmaus? Deeply affected people. International mission trips. Would you raise your hand if you've been involved in international mission trips? These are deeply formative kinds of things that when you do it, it takes you to a deeper level spiritually. It formed community, people who did disciple for 128 weeks it lasted, or whatever it was. I think it was 34. Or an Emmaus weekend, and then the follow-ups to it. It shaped us as a community. Lots of people had those things in common. We have a lot of wonderful Bible studies happening in our church, a lot of small groups, but I'm not sure the places that we as a community are going deeper collectively. I can't really point to those. So I wanted you to know one of the things that we're going to be offering in the next year, Mary Jo, wave everybody, she's leading a group, and we're going to have, over the course of the next year, 5 40-day series that are kind of deep dive opportunities. And they're going to be built around the 5 commitments you just heard us talk about in stewardship: prayers, presence, gifts, service, and witness. One of the points that Roy made as we plan for stewardship is we talk about this stuff once a year and then we move on. But what if we help people really go deep in prayer? What if we help people really go deep on what it means to be community? What if we help people for a season talk about what God has to say about money? We're not going to hound you 40 days about giving, I promise. God says a lot about money in ways that are really helpful, et cetera, et cetera. So we're planning curriculum. There's going to be opportunities for small groups. There's going to be opportunity if you do daily devotions. There's going to be some challenges. So just so you know, there's going to be some opportunities in the next year for us as a congregation to go deeper spiritually. Hope you'll participate in that. And the sermons will tie in. So obviously, I hope you picked up in that it isn't just about Sunday worship, right? So sometimes when we think about growing, I'm guessing when we asked you this earlier, that the first thing that came to mind was increased Sunday morning attendance. Growing, we want to see more people in the sanctuary. Well, that's one way we can grow, but we can also grow in the number of people out serving, because we had a service day a couple weeks ago, right? And we had about 100 people out serving. That's a way we can grow, more people serving. More small groups and more people in them. More youth coming to youth ministry, more children coming to children's ministry, more children singing in our children's musical program, et cetera, et cetera. All of these are ways we can grow. Worship is just one dimension of that. But here's why it's important. Worship attendance is important because it's the one place where most of us are together, right? Where you can build some critical mass, you can build momentum. And so we are going to talk some more today about a potential change in the way we do our worship services, because that's an opportunity for us to leverage a place that we already have some strength and build momentum from it, right? Sometimes it's just hard to build momentum when you don't have sufficient critical mass. So we could emphasize what we do on Sunday mornings as a leverage point to build on some of these other things. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're not just talking about worship as a strategy for growth, but we are going to put our focus there now.
So what if? again, I told you like I like to travel, I kind of like goals. So if we say we want to grow, and this year we may end up with an average worship attendance of about 400. Because we're at 397, is that what the first slides shared? Between, I guess, average from July to October. So for the second half of the year, what if we're so close to that 400, right? So what if, like, for the second half of the year, we could average out at 400? That's pretty great. That's almost 100 more than the first half of the year. So where are we going to go in 2020? What would it be if we, and again, it's an average. So, some Sundays it's a little bit more, some Sundays it's a little bit less. If it's a holiday weekend, it's crickets. It is what it is. So what if we could say in 2020 our goal was to have an average worship attendance of 450? 450 people is 50 more people than maybe we had an average for the last half of 2019. 50 more people is more people, right? And it's an average. So that means some Sundays we're having like maybe close to 500 people. And by the way, these average worship attendance numbers, they don't factor in Christmas Eve or Easter. So we're talking about regular, every week Sundays. What would it look like? Well, 450 people in worship would be an increase of 12.5%. That's pretty significant. And if that's an average worship attendance number, then it's kind of like a flywheel, because then it's like, okay, there's some momentum here in worship. And maybe out of those, 450 plus people that are coming to worship, some of those people have kids. And so that's more children in our nursery, in our children's program. It's more people, and it's more youth in our youth group that are getting involved. And so those numbers are growing. And then maybe it's, some people want to join the choir because they hear our excellent choir. And so we are seeing some new faces in the choir. They're joining small groups and getting connected and growing in their discipleship. And so it's kind of adding momentum into all these other areas of the church. So that's in 2020. What if we, just if we had 12.5% growth, which is a lot in church world. In 2020, that'd be 450. But if you project out, and if that growth continues, by 2025, we're at over 810. 810. Some of you may feel like that's really big. Maybe that feels wildly ambitious. But I don't think so, friends. The potential's here. You are here. We are here together. I believe we can do this. I believe we could go after this, because guess what? 810 people on Sunday morning. What's the population of Orlando? 1.1 million, right? And how many churches are in Orlando and other places of worship, right? Not to mention Disney and, theme parks and stuff. But looking a couple years out, 2025, we're at 810. What's our goal for the end of 2019? 400? Yeah, opportunity to double that, right? That feels exciting to me. That's something I want to get behind. And I was just curious because, again, I'm newer here. I have to stop saying that because people are like, you're not new anymore. I'm newer. So 2016 was the most recent year when average worship attendance was over 450. Since 2016, it's been less than that. You can go on down. The last time when worship attendance was over 720 was 2006. That's been a minute, right? It's been a while. 2002 was the most recent year when average worship attendance was 810. For perspective's sake, I met Vance in 2010 when I was 16. been a minute. So it's been a while since we've had that kind of number here. And you all who have been here can kind of know some of that, and you've lived some of that, maybe some of those reasons. You've watched some people leave, dearly loved people pass away. You've seen a lot of changes since then, right? The sanctuary was kind of renovated, and this building was built. And there's some joy with that, but there's also some pain. We've heard that. There's a lot of hope put into a building, right? And maybe we haven't yet seen it. We haven't yet seen the fruit of that. But friends, we're not done yet. Because we believe, we worship in, we love a God who has commissioned us to go out and to make disciples, to feed the sheep, to take care of them, to eat together around tables and to pray and to worship together, to be fruitful and multiply. Friends, that's the God we love. That's the God we worship. That's the God who's called us. And I believe we can do that because we don't do it on our own effort. What empowers us to go and do this? The Holy Spirit. We're not alone. God is with us. God is empowering us. God's Spirit calls us forth and sends us out. And so I invite you to kind of start to pray, start to wrestle if you haven't already been praying, to pray and say, hey, Holy Spirit, how are you sending us out and empowering us to do your work in the world?
I don't know what you think about numbers like that. I shared with you last week, I've been reading a little bit about Bishop John Branscombe, who was the pastor here in the 1940s. One of the things that Bishop Branscombe is known for is he set big goals, number goals. And one of his priorities was Sunday school attendance. And so he set a goal that we would have 1,000 people in Sunday school. And at the time he set that goal, I think it was like there were like 600 or something. And so he would set a date. By Thanksgiving, we'll have 1,000 in Sunday school. Now, by the way, can you imagine that we used to have 1,000 people in Sundays, right? Well, Thanksgiving came and went, and we didn't have 1,000. But we had more than before the goal got set. And so he moved it. He goes, okay, by the end of the year, we'll have 1,000 in Sunday school. And the year came, didn't reach 1,000. It was like 800. And then he set another goal. Like, we're going to reach that 1,000 by, I can't remember what it was, early in the year. Didn't get there, but it was more. So he said Easter Sunday, we're going to have 1,000 in Sunday school. They had 1,200, right? So it may seem like, wow, 12.5% growth. Well, we may not make it. Wouldn't it be a shame if we only got 8% growth? Wouldn't that be tragic? Right? Like sometimes you set that, it's like that target you set on your chart. Okay. So we want to grow. I want you to hear me say, I've said this before, I want you to hear me say, we have the resources to do anything we want to do. If growth is our priority, we have the resources to do it. But in your personal finances and in your time, at your work, that sometimes you have to set priorities. You say, we can't do everything, right? We have enough resources to do anything, but we can't do everything. And so sometimes you have to focus the resources you have into fewer things so that you can do those things well. Less is more. You've heard that expression, right? Simplify so that you can do a few things with excellence rather than doing lots of things, some things better, some things worse. So I want to make a case for simplification, particularly around our worship. Worship at First Church. Now, this is just a very general statement. Why do churches offer multiple worship services? Most of the time when you start a new church, you have one worship service, most of the time. I started a new church in Port St. Lucie in 19-something. We had one worship service in a high school, in an elementary school cafetorium, one worship service. Then when we outgrew it, we went to 2 services. Then we had tried a third on a Saturday night. It didn't work. We went back to 2. Sometimes you add when your primary service is full. That's the reason you go to multiple services. Another reason that you sometimes go to multiple services is when you want to offer a different style of worship. When I was on staff here back in 1990, we had 2 traditional services and we added a singles worship at 9:30. Anybody remember that? It didn't last, but we tried it, right? Later, contemporary worship came along, and now we have a contemporary worship service and traditional. Also, there are times that you might consider offering worship at an alternative time because you know that there's a certain amount of the population that might work on Sunday morning, so you try another time. Thus, there was the beginning of that Sunday evening service. Originally was considered, let's get the folks who can't come Sunday morning. That was when Brian Johnson started that service, right? That was when that was. Now, some of you may be familiar with the 40-80 rule. 40-80 rule is not a church rule. 40-80 rule is used by space planners. So when you're going to have an event, you usually get a space that fills within what's called the 40-80 rule. The 40-80 rule means that if you are under 40% occupancy in your room, how does it feel? Empty. That if I walk in a room or I'm in participate in an event where the room is 40% or more, less than 40% full, it feels empty. And how does empty feel? Where is everybody? Did I not get the memo? Right? Where is everybody else across the street? Right? That's 40% gives you the feeling of something's wrong. Something's wrong. The 80% rule is once you have reached 80% capacity, it feels full. So if you're going to have a meeting of 100 people, that means you should set out 125 chairs because nobody wants to sit side by side. Once you reach 80%, people go, this is a little too uncomfortable for me. So churches will follow this. They'll say, if we can't reach the 40% mark, we ought to consider what's going on here. Maybe we should move to a smaller room. Maybe we don't need so many worship services. Once you get to the 80% number, you're like, we need to add. We need to find a bigger room, or we need to move to a bigger space, or a different service, right? Okay, so here's our sanctuary. I've heard varying numbers. Somebody may know better than me, but I've heard that we seat about 1,200. Does anybody have a better number? 1,487. Wow, just short of 1,500. 1,487. So just go with mine. Let's go with 1,000. But you have just made my point. Our average worship attendance at the 8:30 service is 59 people. That's really consistent, by the way, really consistent, which is less than 10% of our space, right? And then our 11:30 service averages about 180, though from October you guys were been on vacation, which is less than 18% of the space. Now, one thing that's thankful is that a lot of that's balcony seating, so the spaces, you just don't look up there, right? But you get the feeling. Now let me just also point out, I sit at the back of the room until we process in at 11. You know when most of you get here? 11:05. You know when visitors get here? 10:30, 10:45. And so they sit. Did they change the service time? Right? Where is everybody? Right? And so it doesn't bother me that the room is only 10% full or only 18% full. It matters if you want to grow. Because somebody walks in, they go, what the heck is going on here? Where is everybody? Where is everybody? So let's talk about upstairs. So our upstairs space is a little bit different because we have movable seating, so you can kind of manipulate the size of the room a little bit because of seating. But it seats 250 plus. The plus is really kind of how crowded you want to be in there, and do we want to see people up in the balcony mezzanine. Our average worship service prior to October, you people have really been gone a lot, was 136, which is about half capacity. And then the 5:30 service averaged 50 prior to October. Y'all really gone away, which is about 20% of the space. So 9:30 is not so bad. Like if you were in there today, it didn't feel too bad, did it? Except most of you were 10 minutes late. But so other factors to consider besides just the 40-80 rule. You may not realize this, but to have the 8:30 service, we have 10 staff on site for that. 10 paid staff to pull off the 8:30 service. One staff for, well, you do the math, for every 6 people. One staff, that's a lot. At the 5:30, we often have about 8 staff for 50 people, and sometimes it's more like 35 or 40. So it's a question of stewardship. Volunteers, like we have staff here, but also we need a tremendous number of volunteers to make these services happen, which include ushers, greeters, musicians, and communion. And we only have so many to go around, right? We need way more greeters, and we often don't have nearly enough greeters. We have some times where we're going to have communion, and Emily and I look around, where's the bread? Because we missed a Sunday. Musicians sometimes, particularly 5:30, we struggle with that sometimes, having a full band out there, et cetera, et cetera. It's just not enough volunteer power to pull these services off with excellence. We're not so sure, and Justin could answer questions. We're going to have a separate parent meeting about youth ministry coming up, but you might have a conversation with the youth about whether or not the 5:30 service has been great for youth ministry. I think there's some debate about that. They used to have their own service, and then we combined it with the 5:30 service, and I think there's some conversation to be had whether that was the best thing we have to offer for our youth. I'm usually the preacher. I would say it's not the best thing we have to offer for our youth, because I've heard me. And the other issue is honestly just related to the 5:30 service, is because we offer that every week, it means that Emily and I aren't available for a number of other things that we could do on Sunday evenings. For instance, one thing to grow, we'd like to start offering coffee with the pastor, which is a thing we used to do. We just don't have any more nights to do it, whereas Sunday night could be one of those. Or bring in a speaker, or have a panel, or watch a movie and discuss it after. Lots of things we could do on Sunday nights that we can't right now because of a service that takes our time and energy. Currently, with 4 services for less than 400 people, means we're a divided congregation. And why does that matter? So we just went through the leadership nomination process. And so Emily and I in the room, the newbies, right, we would come to a name and we'd say, well, what about so-and-so? They don't come to our church anymore. No, they do. They go to 8:30. Oh, we haven't seen them in years. Or, no, they do come to our church. They go to 5:30. Oh, we haven't seen them in years. Anybody on that committee remember those conversations we've had? That your new pastors knew about your friends, that because we're so divided. A comment that was made to me last week is, I hadn't seen a new member join our church in years. Why? Because we typically only do that at 9:30 and 11. And they attend one of the other services. That we're so divided now that we hardly ever see each other, right? And that's not good for a congregation. Other examples. We are the least to be considered in this. I'll do as many worship services as we need. But just so you understand, on Sundays, whoever's preaching gives 4 different sermons. Not entirely different sermons. But to do the first sermon and get out of here by 20 after 8, that means we got to cut that sermon short. Then we go run up to the contemporary service, try to make it more a little loose, and contemporary. Then bring it down here and formalize it, make it pulpit worthy. And then completely change it so that it's relevant to youth at 5:30. That's a little schizophrenic, friends. It means that we are completely unavailable between services. So you may notice if you come to the 8:30 service that Emily will wrap it up. I'm running out of here with getting out of my robe so that I can make 9:30 on time. Don't have a chance to greet anybody before. As soon as 9:30 ends, sometimes I leave because we're running at 5 minutes over, run to the choir, pray to get down here to robe for 11. That means the 9:30 crowd never gets greeted by either one of us. That doesn't seem right, especially if we're trying to grow and connect with that congregation. And then again, we're unavailable Sunday evenings for a whole host of things with our current schedule. So here is our if proposal. And by the way, this is a proposal. No decision has been made. We're working a process. We've been listening to you. We've talked to council. We thought this was the next step to present and hear your input. But what if we went to 2 services? One traditional service at 11, which hopefully would combine our current average 8:30 congregation with our average 11 o'clock congregation, which would mean we'd have about 239 in worship. I know that there's no guarantees about that. I know not everybody will make that transfer, but we would hope. Do you think the room would feel a little more full if we were 25% full? Do you think that would create energy? Yeah, okay. And then the modern worship space, we had one modern worship service at 9:30, which hopefully we get to about 150. You may notice my math doesn't add quite there. There's some reasons for that, which I can explain, but don't worry about it. It would put us at about half capacity, which gets us in that 40 to 80 zone. Drawbacks. Are there drawbacks? Of course there's drawbacks. I'll be honest about that. We as humans are resistant to change. I mean, we all are. I am. We all are. We worry that people might leave. Like if you don't offer me a 5:30 service, I'm out of here. I hope that doesn't happen. If you don't offer 8:30, I don't want to come to church that late. There's concern about that. I heard this morning there's some concern among some of our older 8:30 members about parking, like that it'll be too hard to park at 11 because of the crowd. I think we could find ways to figure that out and reserve some parking. And I'm glad that was mentioned. I think we can work with that, but that is an issue. Also, there's some questions about weekly communion. We offer communion at 5:30 and 8:30 weekly. We haven't always offered communion at 8:30. In fact, most of the history of the 8:30 service was not communion service. And 5:30, I don't know if that's always been communion or not. I'll just tell you, we don't have an answer to that one yet. What we would do about that if we didn't have those services. Do we go back to monthly communion? I don't know. We've got some ideas. We don't have that answer. Advantages. Improved overall quality of services. By doing 2, I think we can put all of our time and energy into it to do it well. It means, I think, increased energy on Sundays. Did you feel increased energy last Sunday with all of us in the same room? So we're not quite there. But critical mass brings energy with it, which, you hear people singing. That sounds good, right? There's energy, there's excitement. Increased community and fellowship. How? Well, if you do 2 services, we can be real intentional about that 30 minutes between the services. Encourage people, have food, have coffee, and encourage people, linger out there between the services. Linger before you go to Sunday school, after Sunday. We can increase opportunities for fellowship. Better hospitality. We just need to work harder at it, but if we're not trying to cover 4 services, we can do better, covering 2 services. Faithful stewardship. We can cut back on all the staffing that we're paying currently to man for human staff for services. Opportunities for new and improved ministries because we'll have freed up time and resources to do that. And then the question finally, and we've got to be careful about our time, finally is why not just go to 1 service? I mean, if the logic is that we want to be, in that 40 to 80 and here's this big room, it felt so good to be together last week, why don't we just do that? Okay. It'd be okay with me. I'd love it. I think it'd be great. And then we'd do 2 once we fill that. But here's the thing that I know about you people. It's great to do the mixed thing once in a while. But by the second week we do it, I would hear from some of you, that's great if there just wasn't so much of that contemporary stuff. Or that would be great if we didn't have to hear the organ so much. or here sing so many hymns, right? Because we have in this congregation a pretty strongly traditional element and a pretty strongly contemporary element. So I think probably we need to do 2 services and then on a regular basis come together, right? Maybe quarterly, maybe 5th Sundays, maybe a few special occasions through the year. I'm seeing a lot of nodding. You think you agree with me. Let's make it a special thing to come together, not a thing where we end up tolerating and enduring each other's. Right, okay. That's the end of mine. You want to?
We have 2 ways for you to offer your feedback. I have feedback cards if you prefer not to stand up and share your thoughts. But we also have some microphones. I think Justin is going to help. So if you, and John, thank you, John. If there's something that's on your heart that you want to share, please feel free. And I see a hand up already. Oh, 2.
Oh, okay.
Great.
Let me pass this out.
Yeah.
Age before beauty, maybe. I don't know who the other hand was. I've been in the church short of 50 years, probably over 40 years. I remember the one thing that we did when I was raising a family, and because I had a husband, I was able to do it, was to participate in the cold nights during the winter. That program was very cohesive for bringing us together with a common cause that really felt good. And we had to worry about weapons, shakedowns, and all sorts of things, but nevertheless, at some point in time, it's almost winter, we could consider doing it again. We've got that big common area, and it just might be more grist for the mill, but I'm going to put it out there.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, church family. First off, she had both age and beauty. So, one of the things that I've noticed as a food guy, you guys have an amazing thing that can do a lot of stuff to grow your congregation. You have an amazing kitchen.
Yes.
I've got a bunch of ideas here for culinary ministry. One of them I think is great is soup Sundays on those cold winter nights. Everybody come by for soup and fellowship, building on that idea. But we need to talk.
Sounds good.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Positive. They've got the microphones. Oh, yes, please identify, give your name when you speak, please. Thank you, Melanie.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Sickles, and I'm speaking as one of the instructors for the new members class, the Embark class. And I think a few of the new members are here, but they're probably not brave enough to speak up. So, as we're talking about, and I'm sharing different opportunities besides worship, I'm trying to get them, we try to get them involved in Sunday school. So as you're thinking about your schedule, it may be too much to add to that formula, but 9:30 is when most of the Sunday school classes are, and that eliminates some of the adults who attend the 9:30 contemporary service for participating in many of the existing classes. So that's just something to consider in the mix. I don't really have a solution.
Well,
But-
there is another an adult Sunday school class that meets during the 11 o'clock worship service, and opportunity for many more to be started at that hour.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm Rosemary Rennick. My good friend Jim Manuel, a couple months ago, said, I said to my Sunday school class, if you are going to worship and you see a door without anybody on it greeting, you stop and you greet. So I've been doing that. So I encourage all of us, if you're coming into worship and there's not someone outside like sweet Henry Hopkins used to be, you just stop and you greet people and stay there till worship starts.
Very true, Rosemary. This is our home. You wouldn't let anyone come to your home without greeting them.
I'm that famous Jim Manuel. But I want to say how proud we are to have you and Emily here, and how much and I've seen you work before, and I have complete confidence in both of you. I heard somebody say, I hate for us to give up so-and-so, but I know it must be done. And I think that's pretty much a consensus around here. We're going to try everything that you say. And I also know that anything that doesn't work out very well, you'll be the first ones to tweak it and make it perfect.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Marquita Cooper. I'm new here, and so one of the things I was interested in is this idea about creating a more diverse congregation. And I have been in a diverse congregation. I've been in a congregation that talked about being diverse, and then nothing happened. It isn't something that will just happen. It's a process that requires outreach and work and changing some of the things that we do. So I am very excited about the possibility that this congregation would reflect more of the community around it, but I want everybody to understand that we just can't be here and say, okay, we want to be more diverse. It really is going to require us to walk the talk and to, and I know we have some head starts on that because we have some probably more diversity in this congregation than a lot of the typical Orlando congregations, but it's still not enough. And we're going to need to have people in here for people to see, because when you walk in and the room looks like it looks right now, it looks diverse to you, but it doesn't look diverse to me. Right. So,
Yeah,
but I'm
yeah.
here because I think that there's something here that makes me feel that God is moving here and we can get it done. And so I hope we can.
Miss Helen right there.
I'm the one that said to Jim, I hate to give up 8:30, but I know it needs to be done. And I will come to 11 o'clock.
Okay.
So I am a new member. Ha ha ha. Just kidding. It's like first time caller, long time listener. Anyway, just kidding. So we were super excited to rush here. So a couple of things pragmatically, if we want to grow, I think I pray that we can go outside to get people inside. I'm happy to facilitate a Bible study at a bar. I mean, honestly, I used to do ministry, and our family is really passionate about bringing the gospel to others, and we make sure our schools have opportunities for Christ to be presented. So we help with FCA, and I'm not tooting our horn, but if we want people to come inside, we have to go outside to get them. Mm-hmm. We saw streams of kids going to that electric light crazy show going on, but I kept thinking, what if they were coming in here? You know, they look little. Anyway, but they're not going to come here if we can't go find them and welcome them. So honestly, reaching out and going to some of those places is going to be uncomfortable, but necessary. And really, in the technology-friendly world, we did it years ago with recording the service, but I know it will be challenging for our family if we eliminate the evening service just because of different things, but to be able to broadcast the service live would help me feel connected. Mm-hmm. And I also think it speaks to a younger audience that if that's something we want to tap into, that possibly we can consider doing that.
Thank you, Barb.
Hi, I'm Chet, and a member of the Aldersgate class. I've been here since 2004. I love this church. When I came here, I met my wife here. I got married in this church. I met her as the teacher of my kids in the Sunday school class. And when I look around right now, I feel like the kid in the room. and not because I'm excited. I feel very young when I look at the average age of our church. And when I started here in 2004, I actually felt like the kid then too, because we had a much more diverse age group. When I'm at work and I'm supervising the people that work for me, I'm the old guy. But when I come in here, I want to feel like the old guy, but I'm not. And part of the reason for that we've seen this drop, it's happened since we've been here, is there's nothing for our kids in the morning services. So once they got to the age where they were in the youth program, there was no longer an ability for us, when we have more than one child, to be involved in morning time, because the teenagers were suddenly without anything to do. I know that years ago, Steve Schneeberger, and I think Justin was still here, I don't remember exactly when he came in, but it was the right move at the time to move the kids to the 5:30, and that was when they got better attendance. I don't see it anymore. I'm not saying that doing everything in the morning on Sunday mornings is the answer, but if I want to be the old person again, you've got to start, we as a church have to start bringing in families again. My wife Sally and I, we are offering our services to help Justin. I have long felt, I teach at work, and the thing that makes a program successful is when you have a partner. And I love seeing the two of you work together as a partnership. You complement each other well, but I think that man over there, my kids love him, but there's just not enough of him to go around. He needs a partner, or he needs some help. And our most extroverted kid, and this is very telling, we have two very introverted and one very extroverted. Even the extroverted one has dropped from the program because he just doesn't feel included anymore. It's a very cliquish group, and that kid knows everybody at every school in the Central Florida region, it seems like, but he just still can't find a way in with the kids in the youth program. And I think Justin needs some help, and we are more than willing to help. Or if there's somebody else that's better than us, that's fine too. But I'm all in with you. If you said right now this is what we're doing, you would have my support 100% with the two services and trying to get in younger families again. But our 2 cents.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. We have time for just one more quick question. Here we go.
I'll be really quick. Hi, my name is Rachel Layton, and I grew up in this church and moved away for college and to be a young adult in a different city. And now I'm back and realized that our church really had nothing for people my age, people in their late 20s, early 30s. So I've actually been working with Pastor Emily to get something started at a bar. So thank you for that excitement. We meet Wednesdays at 7 p.m. at Rock Pit Brewing, and it's really nice for other people in the congregation to know about these new things that are happening, so that if you meet people on a Sunday morning, you can tell them, yes, we do have something for you. Yes, there is a group. And having encouragement from other church members to get some of these grassroots things moving is really helpful. It's really encouraging. So thank you for your support and excitement to bring Jesus out into the community, not just here in our church walls. We're trying to be really different. It's kind of crazy that we're having a community group at a bar, but we're trying it, and we're just hoping that people feel welcome, they feel our love, and they'll come from the brewery to our church on a Sunday morning.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very exciting. Samantha, we have reached the end of our time. Before you leave, please turn in your green feedback cards. Also, I'll stand at this door, and I have the holiday schedule handout to give out as well. And thank you all so very much for giving up part of your Sunday afternoon for this important town hall.
Can I say a final
Yeah, of course.
word? Okay.
Of course.
So the change would be to go to 2 services, a 9:30 and 11. Will you support it? Just a yes or no. And by the way, that's not a vote. Like, we're not taking a vote tonight. We just want your input. And you may be more comfortable writing something down that we need to think about, consider, that you might not want to stand up and say with a microphone. We are listening. We are paying attention. Like the parking thing I mentioned earlier, that's really important. We need to figure that out. We will make sure we can answer that question before any decision's made. And a decision hasn't been made. That we're going to take all this, we're going to sit down and talk about it this week. We are talking about youth ministry in particular. This is an opportunity for us to regroup and do better, we think, with our youth by considering this change. So, and then the next step would be we'll carry all that information to council, and council will make a decision.
Hopefully very soon. We meet next Tuesday. So, right now, I would like to introduce Samantha to close us in prayer. Samantha Shortle is a freshman at Lyman High School and plays softball. And thank you for making time this afternoon.
So I'm Samantha, and I'm part of the youth here. I'm going to lead us in the benediction. So, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you